don't solicit them. So I'm face to face with many people who tell me amazing things, and they're from all walks of life. And it is true. I've talked to some people who are famous, and others who are basically sweep floors for a living. And the nature of the stories really doesn't vary very much from person to person. Their level of education will determine how clearly or how well they might tell the story, but they got the same credibility. Skeptics are constantly trying to throw cold water on all these witnesses. And there was one skeptic who recently was talking about I think it was the O'Hare sighting, who said pilots are not reliable judges of what's in the air. Did you hear about this?
Yes. Yes. Can you believe that? Boy, if they're not, we're all in trouble.
So, but yes, I think, hey, my dad is a retired police officer, and I grew up around cops. They can be pretty wild guys, let me just say that. But if a police officer were to tell me about a clear observation that he or she had, you bet I'd listen carefully.
You would.
Absolutely.
You sure would.
Absolutely.
Wild card line, Eric in Atlanta. You're on Coast to Coast. Hey, Eric.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Noory. Good morning, Mr. Dolan. How are y'all doing?
Hey, Eric. Great.
Hey, good. It's 4:20 out here on the East Coast, and I got to have knee surgery tomorrow, so I'm going to give this my best shot.
I'm on the East Coast, man. I'm with you. I feel your pain.
My name is Eric, like I say, and I'm 25 years old, but I'm just I take this subject just as serious as you do, Mr. Dolan, even though you're much more high profile than I am. My initials are E.T., believe it or not. I was born the same year that E.T. the movie hit theaters, so I always get crack-ups from people from that. But I got really interested in the subject, I'd say, about 10 years ago when I was 15. My grandfather, who is a head judge of upstate New York, I won't name the town, but in 1971, he was a sheriff in the Albany County, New York Sheriff Patrol. Mm-hmm. And he had a UFO hover over him and shine a beam of light down. And it's a long story. He went to a woman's house, and her dogs were acting strange, and he contacted the Albany Airport Control Tower, and they said that they hadn't tracked anything on radar, but they had received a lot of phone calls, and it was in the Altamont Enterprise newspaper. So ever since then, I've just really, dug into this stuff for as much as I can and whatnot. I keep in contact with Nick Pope. He told me something pretty interesting the other day about how the U.S. kind of took the testimony from Peniston and Holt and didn't really give it to the MOD, and something about the MOD, kept the Geiger information, didn't give it to the U.S. So he said, their investigation, the MOD, Mr. Paul Webb is the guy who has Nick Pope's job now, and I talked to him, and he's like, the MOD's stance is that happened 20 years ago, and we still feel that it was of no defense significance, which is total baloney,
Right.
So, anyways, as soon as I heard about Ricky Sorrells, became highly interested and, read up on the details of it, got in touch with him, and, correspond with him over the phone a lot. And,
Rick, one of the main Stephenville witnesses.
Yeah, and we just had him on, Richard, before you came on, by the way.
Ah, great.
Yep.
Okay.
Make a long story short, I call a lot of people, and I really don't care what kind of trouble I get in. I should, but his sighting actually occurred mid-December '07. Now, when he got with Linda Howe, they came up with January 1st. But you can ask Ricky. It was in mid-December '07, so it was just before the main January 8th Stephenville sighting.
Okay.
So after I got all his details and talked to him, I figured, heck, I'll try to call around and get some information. So mid to late January, I called Carl Lewis, the public affairs officer for the 301st Fighter Wing stationed at Fort Worth.
Yes.
The Joint Naval Air Station.
Right.
I told him, I know a guy that lives in Dublin. I didn't mention Ricky's name. I said he was hunting on his property. Told him all the details. What he saw, a large UFO. It took off with a blink of an eye, was silent. And I said, did y'all happen to track anything on radar around mid-December that was abnormally large and fast, a UFO? And he said, well, if anything was tracked, then I should contact the FAA. And I said, well, can you at least, speculate on what he might have seen? And he said, no, I can't speculate. All I can tell you is we had F-16s up in the air around January 8th. I said, okay. I called the FAA South Central, control center. My father, he's retiring from the FAA this year, and he actually met John Callahan, who he was involved in the 1986 Japanese.
Yeah, very important
airliner
case.
And he met with my father once up in D.C. So, anyways, talked to this FAA guy in Fort Worth, I believe it was. He said, yeah, I heard about this incident. You're looking for information? I said, yeah. And he said, well, FAA only tracks aircraft with transponders. We send radar signals back and forth between the airplane and the control tower. We don't track UFOs or secret military craft.
Right.
He told me. So I said, okay. He said to call NORAD. So I called NORAD, and they say, well, we only track man-made objects in space. We don't track UFOs. We don't track meteorites. We don't track planes. I said, okay. So they said, can we transfer you to Lackland Air Force Base? I said, sure. So this Major so-and-so answers the phone, and just like Ricky, I didn't write down the guy's name. And in hindsight, you better believe I wish I would have.
Did he help you out?
Well, he says, hello, this is Major so-and-so. What can I do for you? I said, the same thing I said to Carl Lewis. I said, I know a guy in Dublin, Texas. Gave him the whole spiel. And did you guys track anything? He said, well, that would be classified, and I couldn't tell you. A real aggravated tone.
Yeah, typical. Back in a moment. And on our next Coast to Coast program, Linda Bolton Howe joins us with a series of special reports. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll be right back with final phone calls and Richard Dolan on Coast to Coast AM. Richard Dolan, do you think the public could accept the fact that the government came out and said, okay, we've been visited, this planet's been visited, you're probably seeded, and there's nothing we can do about it? Do you think people can handle that?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people would be able to handle that information. I think a lot of people listening to this show right now are going to be in a better position to handle it than the general public, just because they've taken the time and effort to become acquainted with what's going on. I do think that there are going to be many, many people who will have a very hard time with this. Some of that will be for religious purposes. I think, certain very conservative religious belief systems do not make it easy for people to accept this. Some of the bravest people that I know are very conservative Christians who grew up in an environment where belief in this kind of thing is just considered evil and wrong. And yet there are people who dive into it anyway. So there's a lot of resistance. The other thing that's going to be difficult, George, I think, is once the full implications become explored. I mean, this is such a deep and broad topic that affects every aspect of our life when you really start getting into it. And they're all going to be affected. Financial, for example. I mean, I start now thinking of the financial effects of an ET reality. For example, what if it turns out that they have a better, version of our petroleum? Well, I think we would all love that. We're paying so much money for gasoline these days. But there would be financial interest in the short term that would take a major hit. What if they make a better version of our steel? Mm-hmm. In the long run, for our civilization, these would be, great things. But in the short term, they would cause a lot of financial disruption. Then there's the threat of lawsuits galore. You can just imagine there'd be a ton of these, and against people who've been keeping secrets. I can guarantee you that one thing that those people want before anything else is protection against legal action. True. Once this truth comes out.
True.
And then one other thing I can easily see happening is once this comes out, you're going to see a new party system in this country, and it will be very much along the lines of traditional, like third world countries when they start dealing with the West. That is, you'll have the modernizers, and then you'll have the traditionalists. And here, too, I guarantee you there'd be one group, large group of people who would say, we need to be more like the extraterrestrials. They're more advanced, they do this, they do that. And you'd have an enormous group of people who would say, no, we need to retain what is our essential humanity. We can't be like them. We lose